How is champagne made? Because of its origin in the Champagne region of France, it is named champagne, which is a sparkling white wine rich in carbon dioxide. Champagne is also the most precious of all sparkling wines. The grapes used to make champagne must use the varieties designated by the Champagne region of France. Workers start the harvest around mid-September each year and transfer it to the factory's grape presses. The rind and pulp need to be filtered immediately while juicing, as the rind and pulp can affect the final taste. Vintage champagne is fermented in such oak barrels, which first need to be sterilized using a sulfur disc. The lit sulfur disc is inserted into the hole on the side. Once sealed in the barrel, the flame will be extinguished and the smoke produced will kill any bacteria present. Non-vintage champagnes are produced in these stainless steel tanks, which convert the sugars into alcohol about 10 days after adding yeast to them. With wines now around 10% alcohol, winery experts start experimenting with their flavors and aromas, and when they feel they're up to the mark, they're ready to bottle. Then put it in a cold, damp cellar for 5 weeks. This is the second fermentation. The alcohol content will increase to 12% after this fermentation, and carbon dioxide will also be produced during this fermentation. During this period the bottle needs to be turned and tilted daily in order to settle the sediment present in it to the bottom. These champagnes can be aged for up to 10 years in this cellar. When they come out of the cellar, they first need to be cleaned with a cleaning machine. The worker inspects each bottle of champagne for spoiled or floating soft particles, and a labeling machine places a gold leaf label on each neck. Station 2 machines compress these labels to shape them into corks. At the third stop, the 7-fingered trophy is glued to the label, and at the last stop, the label is attached to each bottle, and this scanner will ensure that each label is attached to the correct position. Finally, the champagne flows into the market for sale. Do you know what whiskey is? It is a grain-based distilled spirit. Whiskey is also the most popular distilled spirit in the world. These corn and barley and wheat can be used to make whiskey. First let them pass through a vigorously vibrating strainer to filter out some of the stalks and debris present in them, leaving only the grainier grains. All of these grains are then ground into a powder using a grinder, which is then poured into a cooking pot and mixed with water, along with a special yeast recipe. After about 8 to 10 hours, the yeast will work its magic, forming a layer of bubbles on the surface caused by the release of carbon dioxide. The sugar in the grains turns into alcohol after 3 days of fermentation. The production process of this first half is almost the same as that of beer. Now hop these thick liquids into the distillation tower to bring the alcohol to a boil, leaving the ginger water and other substances behind the alcohol. After the second distillation, the steam rises and condenses into a liquid. A worker collects a sample and distributes it to the laboratory. Here, a technician tests the alcohol concentration through an instrument and analyzes whether it meets the prescribed standards. If tested by the laboratory, the wines are transferred from the previous distillation column to new oak barrels. These oak barrels made of natural wood add sweetness to the alcohol, and over time they become clearer before being transferred to warehouses for aging. All the whiskies here will be aged here for at least 3 years. When they are finished fermenting and come out of the oak barrels, the alcohol tastes ripe for sweetness and takes on a caramel-like color. After reaching 40% alcohol, they are ready for bottling. Each bottle will not be filled to the top of the bottle, but will only be injected into the neck of the bottle. This full-fledged packaging line does everything from bottling to sealing. Finally, 2 workers dip the top of the bottle with hot wax, which dries quickly and solidifies on the top of the bottle, allowing the whisker to get a better seal. Finally, the whiskies are ready to be shipped. Do you know how rum is made? And what are his raw materials? In order to guarantee the same quality of each batch of finished products, the fermenters who have worked here for more than 30 years pass degrees bricks to determine their sugar content. The thicker the test liquid, the higher the sugar content. After passing the test, they will blend it with water and eventually turn it into a stock solution. Now the sugar content has been reduced to 1/8 of what it used to be. Then they're going to produce another liquid. This step requires fermentation. The yeast used in this factory has not changed since 60 years ago. The same yeast is used to ensure that the rum tastes the same from batch to batch. Using sterilization tools, workers then added an ancient yeast sample to the syrup mixture, which was then placed in a 30°C incubator. After 7 days, an active batch of new yeast was born. Now workers pour the new yeast into the syrup and the fermenter. In the process, the yeast eats the sugar and releases carbon dioxide and alcohol. As fun as it sounds, it's a tragic process for yeast. As the alcohol concentration continues to increase, the yeast will be destroyed. After 45 hours, all the sugar has been converted to alcohol, and the yeast has been wiped out. Then only 13% of the mixed liquid will be poured into the giant tower, where they will be heated to 90°C, leaving only the yeast and alcohol that has been destroyed. The alcohol vapors then flow into the distiller's assistant to cool and condense, and the final result is a white rum with an alcohol content of up to 96%. But now it doesn't taste like rum, and then they put white rum into these second-hand white oak barrels that they bought, and the richness of the wood and bourbon turns it into a real rum. Now workers need to assemble the casks that have been delivered in pieces, and then they will fill the casks with 180 liters of white rum. Over the next few years, the rum will be stored in 6 such large warehouses and aged in 80,000 barrels for at least a year to get its best flavor. And high-grade rums take 17 years, and after they are made in wooden barrels, deionized water is added to dilute the alcohol concentration to a more reasonable 40%. Some people love white rum, others love dark rum. In wooden barrels, however, the color of the wine becomes very dark over time. Black and white rum is a wine with caramel added, and white rum is a wine that has been carbonized to filter out impurities. Now they're going to test the taste of the rum. After the inspection is completed, the filling and distribution can be carried out. Have you ever had tequila? It is known as Mexico's fruit wine brewing, and its raw materials are these agave plants. This plant takes 12 years to mature. After maturity, the outer leaves need to be cut off, leaving only the central part of the plant. This thorny fruit can weigh up to 140 pounds. Once the ingredients arrive at the winery, they are cut into quarters with a knife to facilitate further processing, and then transferred to the oven for 50 to 72 hours, roasted at a slow fire of 140 to 185 degrees Fahrenheit. Its plant fibers slowly soften and release their natural juices. When they are thoroughly softened and cooled, they need to be fed into a mincer to break them down into such flocks. The juice is then extracted using machine-driven stone wheels, which are placed in these wooden barrels for fermentation. If the natural fermentation process is maintained, the process takes 7 to 12 days. These juices go through the fermentation process. Traditional distilleries use this pot still for 2 distillations. From the beginning of the agave harvest to the finished agave core of about 7 kilograms, only 1 liter of wine can be brewed. After ensuring that the alcohol level is up to standard, they need to be placed in these oak barrels for aging, usually for at least a year. After the final bottling process, they can wait for shipping.